The year was 1881. A ship called the Ellen Austin cut through the gray waters of the Atlantic, sailing from Liverpool, England toward the promise of New York. Captain A.J. Griffin stood at the helm, surrounded by dozens of men and women who carried nothing but hope. Hope for a new life, a new beginning, somewhere across that vast and indifferent ocean. For weeks, the voyage was ordinary, uneventful, almost peaceful. But then, the ship reached a particular stretch of the Atlantic, a region known as the Sargasso Sea, nestled within what we now call the Bermuda Triangle. And that is when everything changed. The sea went still, not calm, still. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel like rest. It feels like a warning. The wind died, the air thickened, and then creeping in from every direction, a dense, suffocating fog swallowed the ship whole. Captain Griffin could barely see the bow of his own vessel. It was inside this gray, soundless void that his eyes caught something, a shape, drifting, directionless. Another ship, adrift on the waves, moving with no purpose, no heading, no sign of life. From a distance, it appeared completely silent, and that silence was the most terrifying thing Griffin had ever seen. In that era, pirates were not a myth. They were a brutal reality, striking without warning, vanishing before anyone could react. Griffin's first instinct was suspicion. Had this vessel been attacked, looted, left to rot? He assembled a small crew and approached. What they found made their blood run cold. Every piece of valuable cargo, untouched, perfectly arranged, as though someone had just stepped away for a moment. But there was no one. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle, no farewell note, no screaming, no nothing. The entire crew had simply ceased to exist, as if the ocean had reached up, opened its hand, and taken them, leaving everything else perfectly in place, just to make the mystery more unbearable. Griffin stood in that eerie silence and felt something few men ever feel at sea. Not fear of a storm, not fear of pirates, but fear of the unknown, fear of something he could not name, could not fight, could not understand. But greed is a powerful silencer of fear. The abandoned ship was valuable, and Griffin made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He assigned several of his most experienced crew members to board and navigate the ghost ship, tethered it behind the Ellen Austin, and sailed forward, his ship leading, the mysterious vessel following like a shadow. For a time, everything seemed fine. Then the sky turned. A furious storm erupted from nowhere. The Atlantic showing its teeth, walls of black cloud, roaring wind, waves that rose like mountains. The fog became so thick it was like sailing through concrete. The two ships lost sight of each other completely. When the storm finally broke, Griffin turned around. The second ship was gone. For days, Griffin searched. He refused to accept it. He sailed back and forth across that stretch of water, scanning the horizon, the waves, the silence. And then, impossibly, he found it again. The ship was there, floating calmly as though nothing had happened. But as Griffin's men drew closer, the horror returned. Deeper this time, darker. The ship was empty. Again, his own experienced crew members, the ones he had personally selected, the ones he had trusted, had vanished without a single trace. No struggle, no blood, no body, no distress signal, no explanation. Griffin sent one more crew aboard. That ship was never seen again. Neither were they. The place where this happened has a name that, even today, sends a chill down the spine of every sailor, every pilot, every person who has ever looked out at the Atlantic and wondered what lies beneath. The Bermuda Triangle, stretching across nearly 500,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean. This infamous region forms a jagged triangle between the coast of Florida to the west, the island of Bermuda to the north, and Puerto Rico to the south. It has been called many names across the centuries: the Devil's Triangle, the Isle of Devils, the Twilight Zone, the Limbo of the Lost. Every single one of those names was earned in blood and silence. The first recorded encounter with this cursed place doesn't belong to Griffin. It belongs to a man who changed the world: Christopher Columbus. The year was 1492. Columbus was crossing the Atlantic in search of India when his fleet drifted into the Bermuda Triangle. He was a man who had faced storms, mutinies, and the terror of the unknown. But what happened here shook even him. He wrote it all in his diary. The moment his ships entered the region, the weather turned savage without warning. His compass needles began spinning like they had gone mad, as if something beneath the water was pulling at them, distorting the very direction of north itself. Strange lights appeared on the distant horizon, flickering, moving, unexplained. Patches of white water appeared across the sea's surface, glowing faintly in the dark. And then Columbus witnessed something that no logical explanation has ever fully satisfied: a massive ball of fire, blazing, silent, fell from the sky and plunged into the ocean. But the worst was yet to come. As his ships pressed forward, they hit a wall, not of rock, not of ice, but of seaweed. Miles and miles of thick, tangled sargassum grass that stretched across the ocean's surface like a living carpet. In some places, the vegetation was so dense that Columbus's ships ground almost to a halt, trapped, as though invisible hands from below were pulling them down into the deep. His crew panicked. They were convinced the sea itself was trying to swallow them. Somehow, barely, they broke through, and Columbus sailed on, shaken, to make history. But the triangle was just getting started. Through the 16th and 17th centuries, sailors who traversed these waters returned with stories that were passed around ports and taverns like ghost stories whispered by firelight. Old navigation charts from that era are dotted with warnings near this region. Sailors' diaries describe how the sea would suddenly roar in clear weather, how sounds rose from beneath the water, low, groaning, rhythmic, as though something enormous was breathing down there in the dark. Ship after ship vanished, without wreckage, without survivors, without explanation. The belief settled into seafaring culture like a scar. Cross into that triangle and you do not come back. In 1779, American patriot Thomas Lynch Jr., a signer of the Declaration of Independence, set sail through these waters with his wife. They were never seen again. In 1840, a French merchant vessel called the Rosalie disappeared into the triangle. Weeks later, she was found floating peacefully. Perfectly intact, cargo undisturbed, sails still set. But on board, there was no human soul, just one canary in a cage, a cat, and a few chickens, staring out at the empty sea, alive, bewildered, and utterly unable to explain what had happened to every single person around them. Then came March 1918. World War I was raging across Europe. The USS Cyclops had one of the most powerful cargo ships in the American Navy, carrying 10,800 tons of manganese ore and 306 people, departed Brazil, bound for Baltimore. She entered the Bermuda Triangle region. Radio contact broke off. The US Navy launched a 90-day search across every corner of the Atlantic. They found nothing, not a plank, not a life jacket, not a single body. 306 people, gone. The message was now impossible to ignore. This place does not just take fishing boats, it takes warships. 27 years later, the Triangle looked up. December 5th, 1945. 5 US Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, took off from Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station on a routine training exercise. The sky was clear, the weather was perfect, the pilots were experienced. Their leader, Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, had survived combat missions in the Pacific during World War II. There was no reason to be afraid. The plan was simple: fly east, conduct bombing practice over Hens and Chicken Shoals, turn north over Grand Bahama Island, then swing southwest back to base. A triangular route, a routine afternoon. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Taylor's 5 planes completed their bombing exercises without incident. They turned north for the second leg of their journey. That was the last moment anything made sense. Something was wrong with the compasses. Taylor's instrument was spinning, directionless. He pulled out his manual backup. It too was behaving erratically, wobbling, unable to settle. Taylor radioed the control tower, his voice tightening. Cannot determine which way is west. Everything is wrong. Strange. The ocean doesn't look as it should. Below them, the water appeared first white, then green. Colors that matched no chart, no coastline they recognized. The 5 planes flew in widening circles, burning fuel, searching for a landmark, a shore, anything. The control tower listened, helpless as Taylor's voice grew more desperate. How could 5 aircraft, 5 separate navigation systems, all fail at exactly the same time, in exactly the same place? And then came the last transmission. Taylor's voice, barely audible through static, giving the order for his planes to close formation, to prepare to ditch into the ocean together. Then silence. Then one by one, they disappeared from radar. That same night, a PBM Mariner rescue aircraft was dispatched with 13 men aboard to search for the missing planes. It flew into the Triangle. It too vanished, without distress signal, without wreckage, without explanation. The US Navy launched the largest air-sea search in its history. 300 aircraft and ships combing over 300,000 square miles of Atlantic Ocean. They found nothing. The official Navy report concluded with words that still echo today. They disappeared as completely as if they had flown to Mars. 2 decades later, in 1964, a writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine. He titled it, "The Deadly Bermuda Triangle." For For the first time, someone had given the region a defined shape, a definitive name, and a documented history of its horrors. The article spread like wildfire. In 1974, author Charles Berlitz turned this obsession into a book, The Bermuda Triangle, which sold millions of copies worldwide and cemented the legend into global consciousness forever. The world now had a name for its fear, and that name was impossible to forget. The incidents kept coming. December 22nd, 1967, Dan Barak and a friend took a luxury cabin cruiser called Witchcraft just a short distance off Miami Beach to watch the Christmas lights along the shore. A pleasant evening, nothing dangerous. At 9 p.m., Barak radioed the Coast Guard. His vessel had struck an unidentified object. He was calm, no serious damage, just a precaution. The Coast Guard arrived at the exact coordinates 19 minutes later. No boat, no men, no debris, no object, nothing. December 4th, 1970. Pilot Bruce Gernon took off from the Bahamas, heading toward the Florida coast, a flight he had made dozens of times before. Midway through, he noticed a strange cloud formation. It was rotating slowly, pulling itself into a perfect tunnel shape. Against every instinct, Gernon flew into it. 2 decades later, in 1964, a writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine. He titled it The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. For the first time, someone had given the region a defined shape, a definitive name, and a documented history of its horrors. The article spread like wildfire. In 1974, author Charles Berlitz turned this obsession into a book, The Bermuda Triangle, which sold millions of copies worldwide and cemented the legend into global consciousness forever. The world now had a name for its fear, and that name was impossible to forget. The incidents kept coming. December 22nd, 1967, Dan Barak and a friend took a luxury cabin cruiser called Witchcraft just a short distance off Miami Beach to watch the Christmas lights along the shore. A pleasant evening, nothing dangerous. At 9 p.m., Barak radioed the Coast Guard. His vessel had struck an unidentified object. He was calm, no serious damage, just a precaution. The Coast Guard arrived at the exact coordinates 19 minutes later. No boat, no men, no debris, no object, nothing. December 4th, 1970. Pilot Bruce Gernon took off from the Bahamas, heading toward the Florida coast, a flight he had made dozens of times before. Midway through, he noticed a strange cloud formation. It was rotating slowly, pulling itself into a perfect tunnel shape. Against every instinct, Gernon flew into it. Inside, a wall of white, featureless fog. Every electronic instrument went haywire. Compass spinning, navigation systems dead, radio completely silent. For a surreal, stretched moment, he was flying blind through a corridor of nothingness. Then he emerged, and Miami was right there, below him. He should have had another 45 minutes of flying. He had used fuel for 45 minutes, but he had somehow covered a distance that should have taken 90. His average speed, by calculation, had exceeded 300 miles per hour. Physically impossible for his aircraft. Bruce Gernon did not disappear, but what happened to him was perhaps, in its own way, more terrifying than disappearing, because he came back with proof that inside the Bermuda Triangle, time itself does not behave. So what is the truth? The theories are as vast as the ocean itself. Some scientists point to methane hydrate eruptions from the seafloor, massive gas explosions that can drop the density of water so suddenly that even a large ship sinks straight down, leaving no wreckage, no trace. Others cite magnetic anomalies that cause compass readings to misalign without warning, sending navigators confidently in the exact wrong direction. Rogue waves, walls of water rising over 100 feet with no warning, have been documented in these waters, capable of destroying a ship in seconds. Conspiracy theorists offer darker answers: a wormhole to another dimension, an ancient energy source buried beneath the ruins of Atlantis, alien spacecraft using these waters as a base, government experiments so secret that witnesses cannot be allowed to return. In 1975, researcher Lawrence David Kusha published The Bermuda Triangle Mystery, solved arguing that many of the disappearances had been exaggerated, misreported, or simply occurred during storms that were conveniently left out of the stories. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has consistently stated that the triangle shows no statistically unusual disappearance rate compared to other heavily traveled ocean regions. And yet, the Ellen Austin's crew vanished twice. Flight 19's 15 men vanished with their rescuers. The USS Cyclops took 306 souls to a place no search party has ever found. The witchcraft disappeared in 19 minutes, without even leaving foam on the water's surface. Explained or not, the disappearances happened. Investigated or not, the people did not come back. Debunked or not, the Bermuda Triangle remains one of the most traveled and most feared stretches of ocean on the face of this earth. And somewhere out there, beneath 500,000 square miles of Atlantic water, the answer waits, silent, patient, just like it always has.